Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Tuesday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day to those who celebrate. The single ones are probably listening to the show because there's nothing else better to do. Today I'm joined by George Kerth and Tyler Snyder. George is a little bit disappointed, but Tyler, how are you feeling?
I'm all right. It was a good game. That's what I was rooting for.
George, anything to add? Or are you just going to sorrow in your misery for a little bit?
I'll throw some things in through NFL news, and then I'll air my emotions when we hit our Super Bowl recap.
All right, so George gave a little bit of a preview, but what we're covering today is the NFL news, and of course, we're going to talk about Super Bowl. Should be a lengthy discussion. Quick update: there is a schedule change. We will not be back next week. We're going to take a little bit of a break. We'll be back in March. Follow us on the Couch GMs social media platforms for the exact date, and I believe that we're coming back with the first fantasy mock draft of the season. So definitely stay tuned for that. As always, you can find us on thecouchgms.com. But boys, let's jump into NFL news. And kicking off the NFL news, this one pertains just to our podcast, and we want to give a shout out to TD and Buds for winning our playoff challenge. We did open out the invitation. Whoever wins get to come in the show, but you had to use your name. So this is your opportunity to reach out to us, tell us that, hey, I'm TD and Buds, and we'll have you come on sometime this offseason and talk some ball. Any other words you want to give to TD and Buds?
No, good job.
Amazing Super Bowl week. Nice 469 points I saw. Also, props to Sean, who seems to finish in the top 5 every year and says next year will be my year, and then continues to not quite do it. I just wanted to throw that out there to him, too.
Yes, and then maybe we'll just have Don on because he came on second if TD and Buds doesn't reach out. But we talked about a little bit last week. Derek Carr was visiting the Saints, and then right before the Super Bowl, he decided that he's not going to waive his no trade clause, and the Raiders will release him. This makes the most sense. Like, why do the Raiders any kind of favors? But do you think he still ends up with the Saints, or is there another team that you might think that will make a run at Derek Carr?
I think it's probably likely. Yeah, go ahead, George.
Okay, I'll go.
I think you're going to say the same thing, so just say it.
Yep.
No, I'm still liking the fit on the Jets. I feel like Tyler was starting to lean. Yeah, he was starting to lean towards the Saints. I think the Saints are still a strong contender. And I get the whole, like, he's not going to do the Raiders any favors by saying, oh, yeah, I'll take that trade. But I think if he really was going to end up landing in New Orleans anyway, that was probably the more likely way for that to happen. Could be wrong. Could see him in New Orleans later this week because he does not have to wait till the new league year since he is released now, correct?
That would be correct. And I don't know if his transaction has officially gone through at the time of this recording, but it will be happening before the $40 million guarantees kick in. And you have to think
that... What
that
about the Bucks?
It's not a bad option. Like they're like a sleeper team. I guess the Bucks are in some pretty serious cap issues, and like they're going to be a team that people are going to try to poach some for, so they could kind of go into a rebuild and maybe try to like move on from Mike Evans, possibly Chris Godwin. Leonard Fournette's not coming back, so maybe they want to go younger. Maybe they're a team that might be eyeing like an Anthony Richardson late in the first round if he's still available. But he's rising up some draft boards. But the Bucks could be a sleeper if they think that they're a quarterback away. And maybe that's why Derek Carr did back out. He just thinks, hey, I can get more than $40 million guaranteed by signing a new free agent because he's still, young in terms of he's not a super quarterback, but he's not old in terms of quarterbacks either. So this is probably his last real opportunity to cash in. So why not take advantage of it? But there's another quarterback that we do have to talk about that will he be on the move? Nobody knows. It's our favorite segment. It's hashtag Rodgers Watch, baby. And, of course, right before the Super Bowl, Ian Rappaport and NFL Network, they dropped an article, and it was a lengthy one, and it pretty much told us the things we've already known. If the Packers will facilitate a trade, if he wants to, the Packers want him back if he's all in, and no one knows but Aaron Rodgers, who is about to embark on, I don't know if you guys heard this, a 4-day darkness retreat where he will literally go sit in a room by himself for 4 days, disconnect from the world in darkness. That scares me just thinking about it. I don't know. I could never do it. Do you guys think you could ever do a 4-day darkness retreat?
Not unless I have the amount of CTE that he has to cause him to do it.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that helps or hurts. I feel like that'd make it worse. Or make it harder to do, I guess.
Person decide to do it.
No. Hey, there's
I'd get doing it for a day, for so many hours, getting your chance to like sit down there with your thoughts and think about like, run through in your head, oh, if this happens, it could be this. If this happens, it could be that. Maybe it's time for me to go. Maybe it's not. 4 days does seem extremely excessive.
Yes, I agree, and I will say, and of course, because Aaron Rodgers is a Green Bay Packer, he's been one for so long. I did look into what a 4-day isolation thing is, and literally what it sounds. You just sit there. But there are some people, and we talked about it last offseason with the ayahuasca trips and stuff like that. He is definitely into that, whether it's plant-based medicine or like opening his mind in ways that to us seem ideal. I mean, Tyler's comment was like, why would you ever do that? And that's how we think of it. But he's really into like the spiritual aspect of it. And, some people, in different religions and spiritual walks of life, like sitting in prayer is a very common thing. So sitting in isolation might be what is best for him. Hopefully it comes to some sort of decision. And we'll have to wait and see. And we'll get to find out all about it later. Hopefully he goes on Pat McAfee. But at the end of the day, no updates on the hashtag Rodgers Watch, but because stuff came out about it, we had to talk about it. The Eagles might have lost the Super Bowl, and it sounds like they're losing some coordinators as well, as Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator, is expected to be the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, there is not a deal finalized at this time, and Colts fans should know better than anybody that it is not your head coach until he is signed on the dotted line. They have gotten punked before. I think that's the worst word to use, but that's how I'm going to describe it with the head coach. And then Jonathan Gannon is interviewing in Arizona and seems to be a high priority candidate for them. We'll see if one or both of the Eagles coordinators are out the door next season. George, as the resident Eagles fan, or at least the fan of second favorite team, the Eagles, thoughts on the potential of losing either Steichen and or Gannon?
Jonathan Gannon and the Philly media, for whatever reason, have such a poor relationship. Like, in Philly, if you didn't know any better, you would think Jonathan Gannon is the worst defensive coordinator in the league. But honestly, both of these guys, him and Steichen, both deserve a look as a head coach. Losing both of them would be a huge hit for the Eagles, just because that much coach turnover on both sides of the ball is just hard to rally back from after having such a strong season. If they had at least one side of the ball with some stability going into the next year, that makes such a huge difference. Like, for example, we talked about how much Jalen Hurts has progressed. This is the first time he's been in the same offensive system for 2 straight years since he was in high school. I'm sure that that's not the entirety of why he played so much better, but that definitely helps. And I'm sure it's the same on the defensive side of the ball, just not as quite as easy to see because, a lot of us are a lot more expert on the offensive side of the ball than we are the defensive side of the ball.
Colts apparently have a crush on the Eagles. Back-to-back Eagles coordinators as head coaches.
And that was also, the last one was hired after the Super Bowl in 2017. So there's another correlation there too.
And look how well that worked out for him.
I mean, I think it worked well for them for a while, but
I mean, you could argue, is it the head coach or was it trying to piecemeal aging quarterbacks for 5 straight years?
But they're not going to do it anymore.
Until
they signed Jimmy Garoppolo or something.
And I mean, the Eagles returned the favor. They took Sirianni right back from the Colts. Like, it wasn't like they're just like sharing coaches at this point. Still no updates on, the Commanders or the Ravens offensive coordinator position. I know Eric Bieniemy is still in talks with potentially joining the Commanders. They're still working out the scheduling issues. But one former offensive coordinator is being hired as a passing game coordinator for the New York Jets, and that is Titans OC Todd Downing. And I just, Tyler's going to talk all about Todd Downing, but the Jets are really trying something with two between their offensive coordinator and their passing game coordinator. These are guys that have had success in the past, but really struggled in 2022, and they're trying to recatch that lightning they had previously. But Snyder, since you are resident Titans fan, any thoughts on the Todd Downing hire?
Yeah, it's trash. Dude's terrible. He is one of the most predictable offensive coordinators I've ever seen. I could literally tell you exactly what the play was going to be before they even got out of the huddle, because he was that predictable. It was just like I get it. I get it. We had Derrick Henry, so you expect the Titans to run. I get it. But we have seen dominant running backs in the past. And it doesn't matter how good of a running back you are, if you just run it up the middle and everybody in the world knows it's going to be a run up the middle every single play, especially every single first down, eventually they're going to find a way to stop it. I mean, Jonathan Taylor had one good year and they found out how to stop him this year. Like, it's that kind of thing. It doesn't matter how good you are. Eventually you have to do something different. He wasn't able to do that. And on top of that, the dude just got out of jail for a DUI like a week ago. I I get it. I believe in second chances. I really do. And I believe people make dumb decisions. I get that. But the thing that bothers me is Todd Downing faced zero repercussions during the season for his DUI. That he was traveling at over 100 miles per hour while drunk. Like, he could have done the same thing that Henry Ruggs did last year, and yet he wasn't suspended. He wasn't fired. He wasn't, like, there was really no repercussions. He was able to basically walk away from it. He still got to keep his job for the rest of the year, and then walks into another job with the Jets after just getting out of jail. Like, where's the repercussions? Why would you want a guy like that on your team? I don't see it. He hasn't done anything to impress me.
The only reason I could think that they would want him is because they're trying to set themselves up for a quarterback. And now that they have Downing in-house, they hired Hackett, they have Robert Saleh, they now have connections to Aaron Rodgers, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Derek Carr. And I know Cody mentioned that before, so I'll give him the credit for realizing that one. But I am 100% with you. Well, yeah, but still, that's the only thing I come up with from like an actual football standpoint on why they did this. Plus, I think they probably like, oh, it was a bad year. He's going to be fine. The Titans didn't have a lot to work with. But I'm 100% with you when it comes to there was absolutely no repercussions for what he did. I was totally expecting him to get fired after we heard what happened, and nothing happened until the end of the season when the Titans were finally like, okay, we have to make a move, and he was a scapegoat.
And remember something, like, when you think of the Titans, you don't think of an offensive powerhouse, which sucks with the talent that they have had. And you could look at this year and be like, yeah, okay, they had Derrick Henry, but they also had no O-line. Their quarterback was hurt, no receivers. Like, yeah, of course he struggled. Todd Downing was our offensive coordinator last year as well, when we had A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, and Derrick Henry, a fully healthy Ryan Tannehill, and a better O-line. And we still had nothing going offensively. It was we ended up making it as far as we did because we had one of the better defenses our franchise has seen. Like, yes, we had some offensive flashes, but we really never saw it. I mean, look at AJ Brown. As much as I hate the man right now, the Eagles unlocked his true potential. I've seen flashes of what he can do with the Titans, but they never let him unleash. And I don't think that Jalen Hurts is that much better of a passer than Ryan Tannehill that you can use that as an argument. So it has to be coaching and play calling. And Todd Downing did not unlock that, especially with having a guy like Julio Jones on the other side, as old as he may be. And, he might not have it anymore. Fine. But he's still a big name that was drawing a lot of attention, taking people off of A.J. Brown. And yet, even with both of those guys and all that potential, it was still run up the middle with Derrick Henry every single first down ever. It was just poor play calling, poor play decisions. I really am just not impressed with the guy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the no repercussions thing. The only thing I'll say to play devil's advocate, you didn't like two offensive coordinators ago, and he won the most games as any head coach in his first 3 seasons. So, not saying Todd Downing's going to take that path, but Sometimes you just need to change the scenery. That's the point of what I was trying to say. But that's the
Yeah, and if
NFL news.
Todd Downing walks onto a team where he has Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and can, win without having to be a good coach, then yeah, I'm sure the same thing would happen with him.
But you can't have it both ways. You can't say, "Oh, I'm going to use my star power. Oh, it's so predictable," and then, "Oh, I'm not. I'm going to use my star power, and it's so predictable, and he stinks." Like you can't say, "Oh, he has Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, and that's all that. That's why it happened." And then but on the other end, "Oh, we have Derrick Henry, but he called too many runs." Like you can't have it both ways.
Okay,
Like
so you
that's what
had
I'm saying.
Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams, and you're comparing it to having just Derrick Henry. Like, I don't see the comparison here.
You complained about the year before when you had AJ Brown, Derrick Henry,
Julio Jones.
That's Todd Downing. That's not Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur is a different case. Matt LaFleur, my complaint wasn't the star power and the use of it. My complaint was the fact that he had one of the worst offenses in Titans history at the time and then got a head coaching job out of it. Made no sense to me.
No, but what I'm saying is your knock on Todd Downing was all he used his star power, that all he had, and then when I compared him to Matt LaFleur, you're like, oh, it's because he had Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. Like I get there are different situations, but saying one didn't have any creativity and then one didn't have to coach because he had star power, they don't align.
Okay.
And George agrees with me.
Okay.
I was just looking up the Titans roster from the last year that Matt LaFleur was there, and it was very similar. They had Derrick Henry. Their best receiver was Corey Davis, who we've seen now in other teams. Like, he's good, but he's Corey Davis. Like, he could be Robert Woods. Their quarterback was Marcus Mariota. And I think that might have even been the year he was dealing with that elbow thing.
It was.
So there's another one. Like, so very similar, honestly.
You're right. Todd Downing's probably going to be the greatest passing game coordinator ever.
And I'm not saying that either. There's a good chance that it's going to turn back normal, but like a lot, like you can only scheme for so much.
Right. I guess. Yeah, Tyler's just gonna check out now, but we'll move on and we'll talk about the Super Bowl and our Super Bowl recap. Alrighty, the Super Bowl, the third most watched TV show ever, the highest rated Super Bowl in the last 6 years. It was a great game that had one questionable call. But let's talk about the game. I feel like the call, we're going to spend a lot of time on that.
Mm-hmm.
But as the game as a whole, thoughts, what your takeaways were. George, you're the Eagles fan. You're feeling the most. I feel like you have a lot to get off your chest. The floor is yours, my friend.
The Super Bowl MVP by the book was Patrick Mahomes. The Super Bowl MVP in real life was Andy Reid. Like, they started off that game on fire on offense. They went right down the field on their first drive, right after the Eagles scored first. And then the Eagles defense tightened up, and it's like, oh, well, now this is the Eagles defense we see most of the year. There was a major adjustment at some point, whether it was maybe after that scripted 15 plays that Andy Reid likes to do, or if they saw some things on the photos at, halftime adjustment, whatever. They immediately, it seemed to switch to a lot of fake motions, a lot of double moves, taking advantage of the aggressive nature of the Eagles defense in a way that I've only seen one team actually be able to take advantage of this year, and that was Dallas. So, like, they did something that most of the season a team could not do. So props to them for that, and that is the reason they won this game.
Tyler, your thoughts? Initial thoughts on the game?
Yeah, close game. That was a good one. It kept my excitement the whole time.
Which that's saying a lot for Miss Negative Nancy over here, who has complained about football for 4 weeks or more now. So keeping your attention is an incredible feat. So I know there wasn't much excitement there, but I'm letting all the listeners know that was what George and I had hoped for, just something to keep him entertained. And I agree, the game was super entertaining. I think what George mentioned, a lot of credit goes to Andy Reid. I don't know what happened at halftime. What happened to the Eagles defense? Um, Again, I'm not going to get into the penalty quite yet, but the Eagles defense was elite all season. Before the game, they put up a stat about how they had the third most sacks ever, right up there with the 84 and 85 Bears. And they left Arizona with 0 sacks. And Pat Mahomes, I mean, his ankle looked good some plays and he was gimpy on some others. So he was definitely dealing with something. And to not be able to affect the quarterback, you said the MVP should go to Andy Reid. He needs to share it with their O-line because that they've had some question marks there. They've been good in spurts, and they played the game of their life on Sunday. And I honestly think that the Eagles might have took their foot off the gas on defense. Like, as weird as that may say in a back and forth game, but to be up 10 points, to give up 2 incredibly wide open, great play calls, but incredibly wide open touchdowns. Special teams did you no favors on that punt return. The only 3 and out in the game the offense had was right after the Chiefs took the lead. Like, they got up, they got punched, and they couldn't get back on top. And it was a great game. But George, I feel like you do want to talk about what everyone is talking about and that holding call at the end of the game.
Now, I want to lead this off with, because I feel like I've talked to a few people, I've posted on Facebook about it, whatever. Like, it was a penalty. I don't blame them for calling a penalty. Technically, it was the right move. But literally, it seemed like right before that, Tyler was with me for the game, and we were saying about how we were happy they were just letting him play. Like, the only penalties that were called before that were there was a couple false starts, a couple offsides. There was one offensive pass interference on the Eagles that was blatant. But there was no, like, judgment calls that were like, oh, of course, here we are. And then that just seemed like the worst time to have one of them hit. And it wasn't a blatant call. It was a call by the book, but it just felt wrong in the moment. And it still feels a little wrong now. It feels like we got gypped out of seeing if Jalen Hurts could have had that magic one last time, forced overtime, maybe got it in the end zone. Maybe they still lost, but it feels like the ref gypped us of that just because of the timing of the call, but it was the right call.
Snyder, anything to add?
Yeah. Biggest thing I keep seeing from Eagles fans is the ref decided the game with that holding call, and I think that's the biggest false statement. The ref did not decide the game. The Eagles defense decided the game by allowing the Chiefs to march down the field like it was nothing with under 2 minutes left to play. If you don't want that holding call to decide the game, don't allow the Chiefs to get to that point to begin with. That's my biggest thing. I mean, it's the same with as much as I hated the coin toss thing last year. You can go back to that with Bills Chiefs last year. You saying a coin toss decided the game. No, the Bills defense decided the game by not being able to stop Mahomes. I'm not saying it's an easy feat, but it's the Super Bowl. It's the best versus the best. You have to be able to make stops. They say defense wins championships for a reason, and it's not just because you need to have a low scoring game. It's because you need to be able to stop an offense when it matters the most, and the Eagles did not do that. So did it keep the Eagles from getting one last chance? Maybe, but at the same time, we really saw one main angle of the holding. We don't know how much the holding threw off the route. We don't know what could have happened if the holding wasn't called. The Chiefs could be having the same argument back, like the refs gypped us of the game by not allowing that to be a holding call because he was clearly holding. Like, if the corner himself is willing to go on live TV and be like, "Yeah, dude, I was holding. I was hoping they wouldn't see it," then it's holding. So I can't be mad at the refs for doing their job. Like I said, my blame goes on the Eagles defense.
And me too.
Yeah, I'm right there.
Like, you gave up 38 points. And I get it. You're going against Patrick Mahomes. You have to be able to not go up 38 points. And their offense kept them in it the entire time, pretty much. They only had 1 3 and out, like Cody said. But if you're going to look at it, it's either the defense is what lost them the game, or I'd hate to put it on Jalen Hurts because he had the game of his life, really. But that Jalen Hurts fumble for a touchdown would be the other reason you could say that they, lost that game. And I guess when you look at it that way, the defense gave up 31, but it's still more than they needed to hold them down in that game.
Yeah, I agree. By the book, it was holding, and I don't like. And it, to Tyler's point, it did not by any means is not the reason they lost. And I think Sirianni even said it afterwards. Um, and James Bradbury said it was a holding, but I was hoping to let it. Hope they let it ride. And the problem I have with the officiating is not that they made the wrong call, because they didn't. Not that I think it cost the Chiefs. It's just, and we see it time in and time out. It is the lack of consistency. There was other close calls that whole game. There was one point, like, I turned to my wife and I was like, they haven't called a single holding call all game, and I just watched my Lotta hold Chris Jones by his neck. I'm like, they're really letting him play. Like, so it went both ways, and then in that moment, in essentially the first down ended the game because they could knee it out and kick a chip shot field goal that one of my favorite Packers fans said only Blair Walsh of the Minnesota Vikings could miss, which I did love that shot. Uh, so that's the big thing. We saw it last year too. Logan Wilson got a questionable holding call, and that gave the Rams another first down, and that gave them the go-ahead touchdown. 2020, the third down call against Kevin King in the NFC Championship game. That's just holding. We can talk about what happened in the AFC Championship game. Just the lack of overall officiating takes away from the moment, because if that holding call didn't happen, whether it was holding or not, like, we were in line for potentially the greatest Super Bowl of our lifetimes. You could argue if it was the 28-3 comeback, but it'd be right up there, the back and forth battle, two teams fighting up, giving Jalen Hurts legacy defining moment, and it felt like it became about the refs. We all had a ref Super Bowl party. Um, so it was the right call, and I can't argue that, but I did feel a little bit taken back that it was made in that moment.
So here's my devil's advocate argument. In that moment, it feels like we were robbed because he did call the penalty. If it was more consistent in the sense of, we're going to call holding when there's holding by the book, the next thing you know, we have a 20 penalty game and all of us are like, this is a miserable Super Bowl because there's flags left and right. So I understand the consistency thing. But like I said, if you see holding, and I know you've been letting them play earlier in the game, if you let a holding call go because you're letting them play, with uh, 7 minutes left in the third quarter, that's still a big moment. But at that point, it's not game deciding. A ref has to make a call in that moment of, you know, do I do my job and call a penalty when I see it because this moment means everything, or do I continue to just not call things? I let them play earlier, I let them have their fun, but now it's a serious moment. Now I have to call the penalty if I see it because these are the game deciding moments. So I feel like in that sense, he kind of had to call the penalty. Like, how can a ref being paid to call penalties when he sees it allow that in under 2 minutes left, fourth quarter of the Super Bowl? How can he see a holding and let it go, no matter what happened before that? I mean, it's a big
But
moment, so
then
you
the
want to let him
argument is
play,
like
but
you just said, so it matters just as much with 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So why do you let that one go? And
no, I
again,
said it doesn't matter as
consistency.
much.
But it does, though. You never know if that holding call could have led to another, say, Chiefs first down and they went down and scored on that drive or whatever it is. Like, it looks like it matters more because of the timing and because you can, when it's closer to the end of a game, you can map out the possibilities so much more clearly. But you never know if that holding penalty with 7 minutes left, that holding penalty at the end of the first half meant just as much.
But then you could say by letting that go, if he was held and it did throw him off his route, and Mahomes, the second he threw it, was pointing towards the holding. So who knows how much it affected his throw because he was staring it down. If there wasn't holding, who's to say that the Chiefs didn't get a touchdown right there? Who's to say he
Well,
didn't
I
catch
mean,
that slide down at the 1 yard line? Who's
the
to
one
say
thing
that
is,
didn't happen?
no, it's true. But I mean, if Mahomes missed through a ball because he was trying to get holding called, that's on Mahomes. You don't play for penalties. But I get what you're saying.
But he does play for penalties, and he's a genius for doing it. It's one of the things that makes him so great. And, I just don't think one play can ever decide a game. I don't think that's a true fact. I mean, you could say one play can decide a moment, it can decide, the rest of the game. But one play does not decide a game. That holding call does not decide the outcome of that game, because then you could play nitpicky on the whole thing. What if there was one call earlier in the game? Changes the outcome. What if Jalen Hurts doesn't fumble for a touchdown? Changes the outcome. What if Quez Watkins held onto that ball? Changes the outcome. You can go back and nitpick any one play and say, yeah, but what if this? Yeah, but what if this? So one play cannot decide a football game.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are arguing that. I don't think we're saying that penalty changed the outcome of the game. I think we're just arguing to get some sort of consistency when it comes to officiating. There was
But
less
you
than
might not be saying that. You might not be saying that it changed the outcome of the game, but that's what the fans are saying.
Yes.
I mean, we're just 3 people, but there's millions out there that are saying that holding call decided the game. I have been seeing it all day. I haven't been able to touch social media because all it is that holding call was BS. That holding call decided the game. That holding call gave it to the Chiefs. It didn't. And that's this isn't me preaching to you two. This is me preaching to everybody out there that call did not decide the game. The whole game decided the game. As cheesy or generic as that sounds, there was way too many factors that went into that final score. The Eagles may have had that holding call, but they also allowed 38 points. They put up 35 and lost. There's 38 reasons they lost right there. So, one play does not decide the game. That's just my preach to the world.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean,
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But when it comes to the consistency thing and the fact that we are in 2023 and the NFL is a multi-billion-dollar industry that has more GDP than half the countries in the world, and they don't have officials that are full-time, it just seems wrong. And it feels like they could be doing better and they're not. And I think that's the other reason why you have all the NFL is rigged things coming out these last few weeks. You have all the officiating's worse than it's ever been. And I mean, I've been, invested in watching football heavily, maybe now for 15 years. It's hard to remember things past the last few, obviously, because, recency bias and everything else. But it does feel like it's gotten worse. I'm sure it's no different. But as the NFL gets bigger, the microscope gets tighter and people notice things a lot more. And it feels worse. But it still seems like there's more that can be done to make it at least attempt to be better that are not being done.
I mean, as a fan, I can say that I have watched plenty of games where I have been furious because I've said the same thing. When it's my team on the other end, I'm like, yeah, the refs decided the game. The refs are being horrible this game. The refs are so bad. But anybody who is going against us is like, no, the refs are calling good calls. It all comes down to there's going to be human error. As long as you have humans on the field officiating, can they be better? Sure, but there's always going to be human error. The only way you take that out is if you take officials out completely, have New York review everything from the booth and call a penalty anytime they see it, and that's just going to turn into a penalty every play because there is holding on every play. It's it's going to ruin the game. And I don't know. I think that we are a little too hard on the refs, and which is kind of like gross to say because there's always going to be inconsistencies. There's you're running alongside these massive men with tons of bodies crisscrossing, all kinds of things happening. Yes, you are kind of watching one area, but you're still watching like 5 to 10 people at a time. Like, imagine trying to be perfect and the whole world is watching you and thinking you are deciding the game. um and I think it all comes down to what did you want to happen as fans of football. We are pissed off right now because we wanted to see the Eagles have one last shot for a better game, but that's why we're mad, because that's what we wanted. It's just like right now Eagles fans are in an uproar about this holding call, an uproar. But no Eagles fan is mad at the rule that the booth can call a replay when they feel it's necessary with the Devontae Smith catch against San Francisco. I didn't see one of them complain about that. Not one. There's plenty of missed calls on the Eagles that I don't see one Eagles fan complaining about. It's all about what did we want to see happen. We wanted to see that better game. That's why we're upset. So we should be mad at the fact that they weren't calling more penalties to begin with, because that's their job. Their job isn't to just let them play. Their job is to call the penalties. We should be more mad that there wasn't more penalties if we were looking at it as do your job. We shouldn't be looking at it as I wanted to see a better ending, so don't call the penalty.
Yeah, I guess I'm not looking at it from a standpoint too, and this isn't directed just at you. I'm just saying as I'm not looking at it as would I have loved to seen Jalen Hurts get a second chance? Yeah, because that's how the game flow was going. But growing up, like even growing up, like whether the sport is, NBA finals, NFL playoffs, oh, it's gonna be physical. The refs are gonna let them play. Like that's what we hear about. And we saw them let them play, which we've been accustomed to for 58 minutes, and then letting them play cross the line. And we can say it crossed the line. I mean, it wasn't uh, the most egregious. And if we're going to share a screenshot on social media, can we stop showing the one where Juju's already passed him? Can we show it when he's coming out of his whip route? That's another can of worms that drives me crazy. But we've grown just like at the end of any game. There's a Hail Mary. There's holding, pass interference on every one of those plays, and the refs are like, "That's it. We're letting them play." And essentially,
Yep.
it might have been a 5-yard crossing route, but this was a Hail Mary. And Patrick Mahomes threw that ball up because he was under so much pressure. Yes, he pointed because he knew where to point, and that's great. All the elite quarterbacks point when they think it's holding. You see them arguing with the refs all the time. But that's again, it's just back to the consistency. I would much rather have had 5 more holding calls and then them make that like, you know what? They called it the same for both teams.
Yep.
But when 58 minutes go by and then for 2 minutes, that's my issue. Not I wanted to see more. It's just the overall lack of consistency. I still
see,
think
then
it's
we're
props
getting
to Tyler.
into
Props to you though, Tyler. Before you jump in, like it was a poorly officiated game by the point that they didn't call more to keep it consistent, as opposed to them not calling that. Like technically, you should have seen 4 more holding penalties and then that one included, as opposed to not seeing any. So props to you for saying that. But again, that's then consistency, which is what we're all going for.
Okay, so this is my problem then, and I'll voice this, get your opinion, and I'll leave it go. My problem with that then, if they were letting them play all day, so we want to let them play now, fine, but that creates a bad gray area, in my opinion. So my question is, how egregious then does it have to be for you to call the penalty? Like, how much more did he have to hold before you're like, okay, yeah, now you can say he didn't let him play? Like, does he have to full out wrap and tackle him with the ball in the air before you're finally like, okay, now we'll allow it? Like, it creates a bad gray area if you're gonna say you let him play, now let him play. Uh, it's that's my problem with it.
And it's because they're judgment calls. And there has to be judgment calls in a game like this just because of the nature of some of the penalties. There's no clear and obvious way to call some of these things. Just like no one knows what a catch is. Like, I think honestly, and since this rule changed a few years ago, there's a much clearer view of what a catch is than there was before that, because they added parameters that are actual physical things you can see and or time. But like, there's some calls you can't do that to. Holding is a great example of that, because it's going to be different from ref to ref saying like that was holding. No, that wasn't holding. There were former refs from the NFL that came out on Twitter after the game and said I wouldn't have called that as holding. And there was others that were like it was a good call, because it's a judgment call, and that's the thing that stinks about it. But it also stinks when the ref's judgment of holding changes in the middle of a game.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to say that the catch rule is good because after last night, that is still a mess.
Actually, though, so hit me with what you thought was wrong with it, because I actually thought all the calls that they reviewed went the way they should have.
Okay, I will get back to you, but I feel like Snyder owes the respect to get my thoughts on the gray area since he did ask that question first.
Yeah, sorry.
I do agree. There is a gray area, and that comes with the mentality that has been set in place that come playoffs, it's going to be physical. We're going to let them play. And you're right. At what point does it cross the line? Is it a little tug like we saw? Is it more egregious? Is it completely restricting him? I mean, if we're just looking at that play, yes, there was a tug. Bradbury admitted it. He said, I'd hope he let him slide. The ball was still 7 yards overthrown. And he still beat Bradbury. Like,
but that doesn't.
how much?
That's pass interference.
Yeah,
not
that's pass
catchable
interference,
affects
not
pass
holding.
interference. Holding
I
is
know.
not. That means
I know.
nothing.
But what I'm saying is, like, he still got beat on the route. He still got past Bradbury despite the hold. The ball was 7 yards overthrown. So how much did holding really affect that play? Despite that, it's probably the right call. But, like, how much does it affect that play in that moment? Like, the Saints and that Rams, that pass interference that wasn't called that let us do the whole reviewable thing, they have every right. That was egregious, and they needed to. That one should have been. We've seen it too. Like during the regular seasons, like they missed face mask, and that caused a fumble because they can't review face masks. They can't overturn it. So there's definitely gray area. It needs to be cleaned up. Consistency. I mean, at the end of the day, by the book, it's holding. It sucks because it was so inconsistent. Now, George, to answer your question, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Sorry, yeah, just the overthrow thing. Like, I know, looking back, hindsight's 2020. Yeah, it looks like how much did it really affect the play anyway, since it was overthrown. But when a ref goes to throw his flag, he doesn't wait till the play is over and then throw his flag. Usually, sometimes they do, but for the most part, they see it, they throw it. So there's a great chance that he was in the process of throwing that flag before the ball even was seen to be overthrown. So that I would take that out of the argument personally, but I see your side.
Yeah, and I think if just is on my end, just if all of the stuff I talked about that penalty play, I understand it's holding. I get why they call it. I still think the Chiefs would have won the game. I really do. So at the end of the day, I think the Chiefs still won the game. So, and I don't think the Chiefs played so well in the second half. They deserved it. It wasn't like they were robbed of the game. So as a fan, I just want more consistency. But back to George's question from a couple minutes ago about the catch rule. So I agree. Devonta Smith was not a catch. The Dallas Goedert one was his back foot still down, was too close to call, and they called it a catch on the field. And then who was the guy that fumbled?
It was Miles Sanders. You're trying.
Miles Sanders didn't catch the ball.
Yep.
But not to open up a whole can of worms, because we haven't even really talked about the Chiefs yet, and we should. My thing with the whole catch thing is it's gotten too complicated. Like, how come, going to the sideline it's 2 feet, but in the middle of the field it's 3 feet? Like, that's my whole thing. Like, Miles Sanders got the ball. It by the rule, I understand by the current rule, that was the correct call, was to call it incomplete. But because he's in the middle of the field, he has clear 2 feet on, and the ball is in his chest. Yes, it's a bang bang play. But, like, if that was on the sideline, he fell out of bounds, he wouldn't need that third step or the extra step. I think there's too many convoluted rules when it comes to the catch rule, and it's just a whole mess. And we spent like 20 real-time minutes, I felt like, on the Devonta Smith thing, which from sitting from home, I felt like that was an easy no call. And that's challenges overturned. They need to have like a 30-second shot clock. If it's not clear and obvious after 30 seconds, let's get back to the game. So maybe that's more of my issue.
Even
is how long the Devonta Smith one took, and the fact that they're like, oh, the Chiefs are talking to this end of the field. Oh, the Eagles are like, haha, boys, come back. On the Chiefs are like, oh, they got the last laugh, and they're back here. Like, what is that?
Yeah, it brings back to the Julio Jones catch, where it's like, if you catch a ball going towards the back of the end zone, then yes, your toes touching down counts as 2 feet. It's a touchdown. But if you catch it with your back facing the back of the end zone, your toes touching down, and then your heels coming down, now that's out of bounds. Like, if you already touched down with your toes, if it counts the other way, touching down with your toes should count the other way too. I don't know. The catch rule has become way too complicated.
I think that's a bigger thing than Cody's argument of the third foot on the sideline thing. I still think it's the typical 3 feet on the sideline. 2 have to be in bounds. The third one will finish the catch, or you're going to the ground. Most of the time on the sideline, you're going to the ground, so you have to survive the ground, which is what happened with the Devonta Smith catch there. He didn't survive the ground. Dallas Goedert didn't go down when he was toe touching on the sideline. He stayed standing. So that third foot that didn't actually matter, which is how he completed the catch. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's still that same rule in that. We just don't think of it as that because those 2 feet at the beginning are the most important, since those are the things that have to keep him in bounds. The third foot stepping out of bounds is just, oh, whatever. It doesn't actually matter except for the fact that he technically completed the process of the catch. The back to the end zone thing, yeah, that's a little bit of a ridiculous rule that needs to be adjusted, and there's going to be other things, but I'm saying in terms of making strides, like at least that rule for the catch rule they changed a few years back made it better. It's just not perfect for sure.
All right, so we haven't talked about the Chiefs yet.
Yep, I was going the same way.
So I got 3 points on the Chiefs. 1, how is Travis Kelce always so open? I talked about the Titans, how yes, we have Derrick Henry, but if you know it's coming, then how are you supposed to get it to work? Well, everybody knows that the Chiefs are going to throw to Travis Kelce. We made it into the second half, and I literally turned to George, and I was like, does a Chiefs receiver have a catch yet? And they did, but it was like
3 of them. That was it.
It was like you don't even remember it because they're so non-existent. I mean, you know Kelsey's coming and he's still so open. It's insane. Like, shout out to Kelsey. 2, we talked about it on a podcast not long ago how Mahomes has been so good for so long that we're kind of like not impressed by him anymore. And I can still say the same. Like, none of the passing he did impress me. But what I will say is the dude just suffered a high ankle sprain a few weeks ago. He should have been still out by this point. He re-aggravated that ankle. Was he walking with less of a limp? Sure. Did he get some pain meds during halftime? Probably. And was he running okay? Yes. But to have a high ankle sprain and a re-aggravated ankle and have that long sprint down the middle of the field at the end of the game to basically clinch it for the Chiefs, that took so much heart and was so impressive because the dude was booking it. I don't know if it was just full adrenaline or full heart, but that was super impressive to me. So I got to give a shout out to Patrick Mahomes. And finally, my only dig on the Chiefs is every year I feel like the Chiefs are in the playoffs, and every year I hear a speech of Kelsey standing behind Mahomes going, "No one thought we could do it. No one thought we could do it." Every year we think you're going to be one of the best teams. This year we didn't think you'd win the Super Bowl because you lost Tyreek, but we still thought you'd be one of the better teams. And so stop saying that no one thought you could do it. They said the same thing last year, and everyone thought they would do it. So just stop saying that, please.
I mean,
I think that's just motivation to get the players going. But you're 100% right there. Cody, I'll let you go before I want to talk about Kelsey, though.
No, I was going to say, I think it's the same thing. And this year, there's a lot of talk about how can the Chiefs still win the division? Will Russell Wilson do X, Y, and Z? Or, oh, look at the Chargers. Like, there was a lot of talk. And again, it's just that old, you know, Mahomes has been a starter for 5 years, has been the AFC Championship all 5 years, has 2 Super Bowl wins, 2 MVPs. He's becoming the next Tom Brady. And he's just more likable. I mean, we're going to get into Tom Brady because I won't bring that picture up. And if you know what picture I'm talking about, just laugh as you're listening to that. The Chiefs, though, incredible game. And Patrick Mahomes had less than 200 yards passing. The Chiefs had 1 less rushing attempt than they did passing attempt. Let me say that again. For an Andy Reid offense in the Super Bowl, had 1 less rushing attempt than passing attempt. Almost perfect balance. And that's just another credit to that offensive line and rushing the ball. Isaiah Pacheco, unsung hero of this playoff run. 7th round pick and just runs angry. Just hits the hole hard, goes full speed, just goes forward. Gets up, juiced even more. Like, excited to see his growth. But the one thing I do really respect about Pat Mahomes is knowing the moments. And he said in his post-game quote that I don't want the Super Bowl win to overshadow how well Jalen Hurts played. And I think that is a great point. Jalen Hurts silenced every doubter on Sunday. He threw better than I thought he could. He looks lights out. He's going to earn that second contract that everyone was worried about. Silenced every doubter, a true leader. So and Patrick Mahomes just won the Super Bowl, and it's like, hang on, don't let this overshadow how well Jalen Hurts played. I think it silenced the doubters. So props to him. And then the Kelsey brothers moment after the game too, like just them hugging. I know it was over talked about, and I saw Donna Kelsey on too many interviews, too many podcasts. Like I don't know why I got push notifications for what her outfit was during the game. I did not need to know that. But seeing the Kelsey brothers, connect middle of the field, and then seeing Travis get emotional about how it sucks to see him hurt, the awkward situation he was in, to be happy but see his brother hurt. Um, Getting to see those two was, a pretty cool moment on the Super Bowl stage.
So at one point on your Jalen Hurts silence the doubters. I'm not going to go here and start trash talking Jalen Hurts or how he played. So just don't get ready to jump down my throats. The only thing I want to say is yes, like he did do really well, and stats wise he killed it. But for the love of God, you have other players than Jalen Hurts. There was way too many times where they were forcing the Jalen Hurts run, where it was, give Sanders the ball, give Scott the ball, give Gainwell the ball, throw the ball. Like you have other players than Jalen Hurts, and I say that for two reasons. One, I feel like they forced it so much that in the first half it was crushing, and we did see some big plays in the second half. But I feel like in the second half, a big reason why the Eagles ended up having to punt and their offense started to really sputter was because Jalen Hurts was only getting 1 yard per carry at one point. Like he was struggling at one point, and the Chiefs defense knew it was coming, and it was still read option, but I'm gonna keep it. Read option, and the run is wide open, but Hurts is gonna keep it. Like I like Jalen Hurts. I like what he did, but they got to stop forcing it. And two, it's the same thing I said about Lamar a few years ago that people thought I was an idiot for saying. If you run that many times, you're going to get hurt and you're going to have trouble staying healthy. And if you really think that Hurts is your future and you're about to sign him to this big long-term deal, now I get it. It's the Super Bowl. Pull out all the stops. 100% agree. But they did this all season long. If you want Hurts to play a long time for the Eagles and really do well, you got to find something else than Jalen Hurts running. You almost lost Hurts before the playoffs because they were forcing it in a game where he didn't need to. And now Lamar has had 2 back-to-back seasons where he has not been able to stay healthy. And like, great, you want to give Lamar this big contract, but he can't stay healthy, and it's just a bad situation. So I don't want to see the same thing happen to Jalen Hurts. So I feel like they got to find a different way to run that offense. At least
and
take
he
some
showed
pressure
so
off.
much passing potential in this game, and they have such the offensive line that they should be able to run the ball with the running backs. Maybe Miles Sanders isn't the answer. He did not have a great game, but I still think he should have touched the ball a few more times. If you look at the rush attempts, I think Jalen Hurts had the same amount as the running backs combined. But even yet, Kenny Gainwell had a great playoffs coming into this. Boston Scott is that little change of pace back that every team wishes they had, I feel like, except for the teams that have some similar guys. But you know what I mean? Like they should have used the running backs more, and Hurts I think maybe a couple carries less. He still did fine. But yeah, I get what you're saying. He showed passing potential though, so I'm interested to see in the future how if his story arc goes similar to like a Donovan McNabb did in Philly, where he was a rushing quarterback coming out of college. He really progressed. By the end of his career, he wouldn't even have known too much about his rushing ability because he passed the ball fantastic. Like we're gonna see if that's gonna be a similar story arc, or if it's gonna be more like a Lamar, where the only way they can keep the offense moving down the field is by using his legs and using them too much. But I want to go back to the Chiefs because we're trying to finish this off with the Chiefs here. The Travis Kelce thing, I think I kept saying multiple times in the first quarter, even, how do you keep leaving Kelce so open? And I think one is Kelce is a beast as to such, like he can do things at a position that everyone's bad at that no one else can. He isn't a wide receiver because you can't really line him up with a corner because he's going to box you out and he's going to, make a catch in your face anyway. You can't cover him with a linebacker because he has the skill set close to a wide receiver where he's just going to completely burn him. You can't cover him with a safety because most of those guys can't cover like a corner anyway, or they don't have the size if they can. So like the type of athlete that he is, it is hard to find somebody on a defense with the skill set that can go one-on-one with a guy like that and win. I think when I looked at it at the beginning of the game, I said the Eagles' best chance is probably to put Darius Slay on him because he's your best shutdown corner and hope the ball just doesn't get to him. But when the Eagles tried to do that, the offensive scheme would do things like shift him to the inside on motion and end up having him up a linebacker or with that slot corner. or they would do weird things in their actual, passing game where like he would run the deep so it ended up having him on a safety or whatever it is. Like the scheme was absolutely brilliant, along with the fact that he's impossible to block with one person or cover with one person because his skill set is so unique.
I have one more note on the Chiefs that I definitely want to throw out there. I feel like we spend so much time talking about Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey and even Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown. Like, there's some people that are not getting talked about that really deserve it. And one of the biggest ones is Nick Bolton. What a hell of a game Nick Bolton had. I mean, he had the defensive touchdown. He almost had a second one if Miles Sanders would have been considered a catch. And he also had led the team in tackles on top of having that defensive touchdown. Like, and he was just all over the field. I mean, we saw it. There's even some plays. I mean, the bad thing with defense is you make a lot of plays that don't show up on the stat sheet. And sometimes not showing up on the stat sheet means you had one hell of a game. Well, he showed up on the stat sheet and he was all over the field. He made some plays that will not show up there. So huge shout out to Nick Bolton. I remember turning to George at one point during the game going, Mahomes really doesn't have that many yards. I'd consider giving Nick Bolton the MVP. Like he was playing that well. And L'Jarius Sneed was out to murder Devontae Smith, but still made some really, really good tackles and pass breakups.
Oh, man.
But yeah, huge shout out to Nick Bolton there.
I literally said as they had the cable cam come to the stage for the MVP announcement, I was like, give it to Nick Bolton, you cowards. Because he had a heck of a game. So I definitely he deserved the shout out. And he talked about L'Jarius Sneed's hit. But we got to talk about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. What?
Yeah. Hits, by the way. Like, Devontae Smith probably left that game feeling like he was in a boxing match. At least in the first half, he was getting destroyed every single time he touched the ball. But no, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on Isaiah Pacheco, is that what you're going to say?
Yeah. One of the best hits in recent memory. Clean, legal, like, heard it pop in Pennsylvania from Arizona. Like, that wasn't, like, we just felt it. So wanted to give a shout out to him. And then my last thing before I have one other question about like the future of these teams.
Hold on, before you go into one other thing, only because it's on the same topic, last hit I really want to talk about is Jason Kelsey on Trent McDuffie. That dude is a center and made a hit on Trent McDuffie that laid him out, coming back towards the ball. The fact that that old fat center was able to run and run back and still make that big of a hit in that short amount of time is absolutely impressive, and the dude is a legend.
Jason, if you're listening, tell me how many kegs of beer it needs for you to come back next year, because I'll make a GoFundMe and give you 200, 300, whatever it takes. You're just too fun to watch.
Yeah, it was a heavy hit. I mean, it was an ahead. So definitely could have been called. I don't think they were going to call it on Jason Kelsey, though. It's like, was that a center? So, yeah, hopefully Kelsey comes back. But before we get into the future of these two teams, I know the probability of scoring on the last play is like next to nothing when you're 80 yards away. But whose idea was it for Hurts to throw a Hail Mary?
Right. That thing was a duck. That was an ugly throw.
Yeah. Like you have Devonta Smith, Miles Sanders, Boston Scott. Like, why aren't we AJ Brown? Why aren't we doing the lateral play? Like, why not?
Like, number one, I was like, why did they? I understand, like, they probably on the special teams had the idea of like, let's just run up a couple yards, take a knee, let the offense run. But number one, you had space for 5 to 10 more yards there and had the clock to run on it. That would have made it easier, Hail Mary. Number two, when you found out you had 7 seconds, 8 seconds, something like that for that last play, take a 10-yard out. They were giving it to you. Make it even possible to reach the end zone. I mean, it wouldn't have hurt through that duck even from the 45, but you would think from the 45, most quarterbacks could make it to the end zone. From the 35, yeah, it's most likely not going to happen even with Patrick Mahomes back there.
That dude threw it like 30 yards. That was an embarrassing throw.
That throw was an embarrassment, but it was doomed to be into the end zone from the start. Like, I wouldn't have expected it to make it to the end zone even if he didn't throw a duck.
I saw him throw that ball and I cringed.
I was like, all right. Too. When he didn't like get rid of it right away, I'm like, okay, they're setting up like a deep crosser, hook and ladder type thing. And then he just cocked back and launched that. And I was like, wait a sec, they just ran a Hail Mary? Like, I was like, I had to like check the math. I'm like, they are farther back than I think, right? Um,
Yeah,
but
they're
okay,
at the
so we all
35.
yes, okay, so maybe Josh Allen, maybe Patrick Mahomes, maybe
And that's a
prime Aaron
baby.
Rodgers, Hail Mary King could have made it to the end zone, and I don't know about that. But last thing before we get out of here, because we've already gone a lot longer than I expected this episode to go. Long-term outcomes for these teams. I saw the odds already come out. Chiefs are the favorites to repeat the Super Bowl if you had to bet today. Eagles were down to 4th. What is your long-term outlook on these teams? Do you think there's potential for a rematch?
Yeah, I think the Eagles are a super young team. The base of their team is young. They are going to lose some pieces, but the pieces they're going to lose, they've already replaced or they can replace. I feel like there is going to be some contract issues. Jalen Hurts is estimated to get about 50 mil average annual. That's huge. And I know the salary cap is going up, but not that much. So that's going to take a big chunk. You're not going to be able to re-sign all the people you wanted, or not gonna be able to go at all the free agents you wanted if you're giving them that kind of money. So maybe they won't be quite as dominant as they were this year. But I still think the Eagles are going to have a young core for a long time. I think they'll be in consideration for NFC championship game probably each of the next 4 or 5 years. Chiefs, as much as I want to say, yeah, maybe they'll go down now. Maybe they'll go down now. I don't see them going down until they prove they can go down. The only thing that I might say with the Chiefs is if Andy Reid really does retire this year and Eric Bieniemy leaves, I mean, Mahomes is amazing, and Kelsey is amazing, but can the Chiefs still be this dominant, losing two of the best minds in football right now, um, along with having some moving pieces? But at the same time, they get another good coach, and or Andy Reid stays there. Maybe they even go out and get a top free agent, or go get a top wide receiver and have yet another dominant piece. The Chiefs could be right back in the Super Bowl again next year. I hope not, but they could be.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the Chiefs, especially because there was a news story that came out on Monday that is very, very likely that Andy Reid is back. The Eric Bieniemy thing, we're not sure, but we still know that Andy Reid's the mastermind of the offense, and Eric Bieniemy might not even be getting head coach offers because he doesn't have as much leverage as we think he does or want to believe he does, which could be why he's trying to go to, say, Washington or Baltimore and get an offensive coordinator job there, kind of release himself from the Andy Reid tree. But anyway, the Chiefs aren't going anywhere. If they've been there 5 straight years, yeah, maybe they happen to not get there next year. They're going to be a playoff team. They're going to be competitive. Patrick Mahomes is going to keep them in it for a long time. The Eagles side, like Tyler said, they're going to lose some pieces. Most of what they're going to lose is the little bit of remaining star power they had from their 2017 Super Bowl. And most of it has been replaced. Or they have the ability to replace because they have the 10th overall pick. We were talking about how this could be such a quick rebuild last year because they had 3 picks in the draft. Then they proceeded to, make some trades and moves, but they traded for a first round pick this year. So now they were just in the Super Bowl, get the 30th pick, and they have pick 10 too. So they can replace some of those guys they're losing, fix some of the cap issues by taking 2 first round picks that could jump in right away. And the NFC is nowhere close to as deep as the AFC right now. So the Eagles are going to be around for a while as well. I think it's right now betting odds Chiefs are the favorite to win the Super Bowl next year, and the Eagles are 4th, and I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I don't see anyone in the NFC competing with the Eagles right now, except maybe the Niners if they can get healthy. But I think that's one of the biggest things is if you want to talk down on the Eagles, like who in the NFC are you really that impressed with? Is there that many NFC teams that you're impressed with that you think you can take them out? But go ahead.
I mean,
Coach.
I think it's Philly. I think it's San Francisco, like you said, and Dallas is still one of the better teams. And yeah, that's where you're at right now. Another team's gonna come up. The Lions are on the rise. The Packers could come back if Love plays well or whatever happens. But
Hey,
yeah,
Love,
it's not as
Love lit
deep.
up the Eagles in the second half.
Exactly, and that's why I'm saying like I
So,
don't want to
so
go back
I'm
to
gonna.
Rogers Watch. Go, Cody.
No, I was gonna say. So I get what you're saying with the Eagles, um, and they should be around. Like I'm not saying they shouldn't, but just anyone out there that's an Eagles fan or being like, "Oh, we're back next year," like realize there's going to be a ton of change. Uh, we talked about at the top of the show. Most likely losing Steichen, probably losing Gannon as well. That's why Arizona has waited this long. That's two coordinators. They're probably going to take some pieces of their staff to be their coordinators. Like, this is going to be an elite coaching reign from the Eagles, in all likelihood. They have 10 starters, 11 if you count the long snapper, that are up for free agency. Yes, it might be guys like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, which you have replacement for. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, their acquisition from this past season, they have to re-sign him. Talked about Jalen Hurts. That's a huge contract number. They're already over the projected cap for next season, so they have to cut back. So yes, they have the picks, but they also had extreme injury luck this season. Like, they had the least amount of injuries all season long. Like, that's probably going to regress some. So, like, I'm not saying the Eagles are next year going to be the Los Angeles Rams and, like, man, what happened? Like, I don't think that's the case. Like, it's not that severe. But I don't think it's a cakewalk that they're right back in the championship game even. I think it's a lot of change, and they could have a little bit of a down year until they get accustomed to the new coaching staff.
So, just to clarify, Chiefs are number 1 to win the Super Bowl next year at plus 600, followed by the Bills and the Niners. The Eagles are tied with the Bengals for 4th best odds at plus 900. Packers are somewhere in the middle of the pack at plus 3,000. And the Titans are tied for 5th worst at plus 7,500. So that's kind of what we're looking at with odds. Your bottom 4, in case you're curious, is Bears, Colts, Texans, and the worst and best odds is the Arizona Cardinals.
Wow.
Tied with the Texans.
That's because Kyler's going to miss half the season and they don't have a head coach. So
both good reasons.
And they're probably Hopkins. Like, they're in rebuild mode. So
yep.
To look forward to. It was a great season. We had a ton of fun covering it from a fantasy perspective, and of course talking just football. I mean, this episode was a lot of fun, at least for me. Just
got to throw out my 2 more notes before you sign off here. Sorry, it sounded like you're about to sign off. All right, 2 more notes before you sign off. 1, congratulations to Jalen Hurts for breaking the Super Bowl record for most rushing touchdowns by a quarterback. Previous record was 2. He hit 3. Cool. But fun fact that I did not know until today, and I didn't believe it at first, and I had to look it up. But Jalen Hurts scoring that touchdown is the first Alabama player to score a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Alabama is notorious for always being the number 1 college team and having so many players enter the draft every single year, so many first-round picks, and that is the first Alabama player to score a touchdown in the Super Bowl. That is mind-blowing.
Yeah, I think that stat's broken. And then you also consider that Devontae Smith was a toe tap away from being the second because he went out of bounds at the 1-yard line in the 4th quarter in the same game.
Speaking of betting, just on a personal note, I had a same-game parlay that had a Hurts, Kelsey, McKinnon, and Gainwell. McKinnon slid at the 1, Gainwell got the touchdown on the first drive, and then they called it back at the 1. And then Hurts ran it in. So
I'll have you know that I had a same-game parlay that would have won me $93 on a $3 bet, and the only leg that failed was Marquez Valdez-Scantling needed 15 yards. 15. He didn't have a catch. We were hyping him up so much on the last podcast. I was like, oh, easy money. I'll throw that one in there too. I missed out on the $93 from 15 yards from him. Unreal.
And I missed on 2 separate parlays where the only leg that missed was the Eagles money line. So
hey, I did hit on tails.
Like $40 on that one too. I also hit tails.
I hit on octopus and doink. So come at me.
That's true.
And that's how we'll end our 2022-2023 season with an octopus and a doink.
Yeah, no, nothing else to go after. As always, thank you again for listening to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, we are taking a break. We will be back in March. That doesn't mean you still can't get involved. If you have ideas for the podcast, if there's something you want to see, something you need help, or you want us to talk about more, hey, you didn't talk about Fab style enough next year, let us know. We're loved. Like, this is your chance. Tell us what you want. But as always, We are the Couch GMs podcast for Cody Roadcap. I'm joined, as always, with George Kerth and Tyler Snyder, and we will see you next month.
Boom.
Nice.
Choo choo.